We're going to do a brief lesson today on faithfulness. And what I'm hoping is just to touch this one word, this one quality, and believe through this brief teaching on it that this quality is going to go into all of our hearts and stay there for the rest of our lives. And I want to show you something, a simple way to show the qualities of faithfulness. It's from the book of Luke, chapter 12, chapter 16, and chapter 19. Let's look at those three. Let's start in Luke chapter 12. We'll give a little preface here to say that we're taking this occasion we're meeting here with some of our friends from the Gateways Beyond Training School, and also some of our friends from the Tikkun International Board, and I'll mention a few of them in just a moment. But it's an example of what I want to talk about here, of the word faithfulness. So this isn't just a theoretical subject, it's a subject that we want to live in. So let's start with this. We're going to read three sections, Luke 12, Luke 16, and Luke 19. We'll start in Luke 12, verse 42. And it says this, השיב האדון, מיהו איפה הסוכן הנאמן והנבון, אשר אדון יפקידהו על משרתיו, לתת להם את ארוחתם בזמן. אשרי העבד ההוא, אשר אדוניו יבוא וימצאהו עושה כן. אמת אני אומר לכם, על כל נכסיו יפקיד אותו. Verse 42, and the Lord responded and said to them, who then is the faithful and wise steward, whom the Lord will appoint over his servants to give them their food at the right time? Verse 43, blessed is that servant who his Lord, when he comes, will find him doing so. Truly I say unto you, that he will appoint him over all of his possessions. Wow. So we see that the primary quality here that the Lord is talking about is the quality of faithfulness. A long time ago, I wrote a book called Covenant Relationships, which the subtitle is A Biblical Handbook on Loyalty and Integrity. Well, another word for loyalty is faithfulness. And what we want to do is to let God develop faithfulness inside of us. That is the quality that he is looking for. Now notice this passage here that the Lord comes back and he's looking for something. He's asking a question. He's saying, who has been faithful here? I want to give you a big secret to life and your circumstances in life. Much of life is simply a test of faithfulness. That's what's going on. What you think is going on in the circumstances and the problems and what you're trying to solve, that's not what the Lord is looking for. The Lord is not necessarily looking for a solution. He's looking to see whether you will be faithful in the midst of that situation. That is the quality that God is looking for. Here he says when he comes back, and he says God will find out who is being faithful now, so that then in the future, he will appoint him over all of his possessions. So the first thing you need to see is the word test. That this is a test. What is going on in your life is a setup from God. It's a test. And the answer that he's looking for is the word faithful. Not being smart, not being good looking, not being strong, not being rich, not being successful. He's looking for people to be faithful. The second thing we need to look here and to see is the time element. Notice he says, who is being faithful now? And then I will appoint him over all my possessions. In other words, there is what you do now affects what you will do in the future. What you have now is to be faithful. What you have in the future is to be blessed. And what people totally miss this is they put all their effort in trying to be blessed now, and they usually do it by trying to skip over being faithful, and they're completely missing the whole purpose of what's going on. God's saying, be faithful in this time, and then, which is a short time, and then I will be faithful to bless you forever in the future. So there is a test factor and a time factor. The test is whether you will be faithful. The time factor is what you do now will affect how you will be in the future. He says, what you are found now doing, I will then put that into eternity. In other words, if you're doing the right thing now, if you're giving the meal in the right time now, then I will let you do that forever. If you're doing the wrong thing now, then you're going to get the wrong results of that forever. So he said that's what, it's a test of faithfulness, and there's a difference of time from now and then. What's really also amazing in this little section here is the word all, that he will appoint him over all of his possessions. In other words, you're not going to miss anything. Don't worry about whatever it looks like you're going to miss now, because that's not important. What's important, because God can give you everything over all of God's possessions. Now, if I said that, it might not make much difference. But this is Yeshua saying this, who all things belong to him. And he's saying, I will appoint, if I'm just looking for somebody to be faithful, I will appoint you over all things. So it seems interesting when you look at that, the mathematics. How can he put someone over all of his possessions? Now, it doesn't say this in the passage, but the whole context is he's coming around and looking for someone to be faithful, and it seems like it's a little hard for him to find somebody. In the generation of Noah, there was one person on the whole earth. In fact, a lot of passages in the scripture for long periods of history, God couldn't find anyone. Or maybe he could find one person or a small number. I want to tell you that everybody thinks, the book of Proverbs says that everybody thinks he's faithful. Now, God says it's not really true. And we need to wake up to that there's not many people who are really faithful. And God, that's what God is looking for. And so that means also that maybe we think we're being faithful and we're not. We're really serving things of our own, trying to get our own blessing, and we're trying to put a faithfulness label on it. That's what he says. Basically, everyone will declare, I'm being faithful, but God says, I'm having trouble find someone. Now, let's look at this, and I don't want to exaggerate, but I'm looking at a young generation of believers around the world, and I could be wrong. But my impression is they're looking at their parents' generation, and they're not seeing a lot of leaders in faith and in ministry and congregations that strike them as being faithful. They can see a lot of television programs, they can see a lot of advertising, but when they say, do you see someone that strikes you as being faithful? Well, I'm not sure. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons that we're here today is because of our commitment of faithfulness to our relationships. Our relations together with me and with Dan and with Paul and with Eitan and with David and with Eddie as we're here together, we're trying to bring a testimony that there is such a thing. That leaders can be faithful to one another, not for a year or two, but for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. And I was thinking, I'm embarrassed. I'm not sure that I can think of another example. Can you find me some leaders who've been together for 30, 40 years that have demonstrated faithfulness to one another? Of course, you have to have faithfulness to the Lord. But where is there a testimony? People ask me, what are you all going to do with this group of people? What are you and David and Dan and Eitan and Paul and Eddie, what are you all going to do? What are your projects? I'm thinking, you know what? Maybe we don't need to do anything. If we can just somehow manage to keep being friends, keep being faithful to one another for another few years, I'm not sure I see this product anywhere. I would be happy to know if it was, but I'm not sure. And I think to give an example of faithfulness and loyalty in long-term relationships is a jewel, is a commodity. I'm using a carnal word, but it's a commodity that is needed in faith. In fact, what kind of scares me a little bit about this is I'm feeling like we have to be faithful to one another, because I feel like the world's looking for an example. I don't want to exaggerate, but I feel like there's people all around the world looking. If these guys can't be faithful to one another, it's all over. Then nobody's going to be. And the people around the world are looking and saying, is anybody faithful? And they say, well, these 5, 6 guys, these guys have been faithful to one another. This is a commodity to bless the body of Messiah around the world, is just to be faithful. Faithful in what you do to the Lord and faithful to one another. Paul, I mean, you know everybody who's anybody anywhere, you know. It's not an easy commodity to find, you know. There's people being faithful. Can we live that out? This is a test for us. It's a commodity. It's a testimony that God wants to give. And we always want to make sure, is my life building a testimony of faithfulness? When people are going to look at that, are they going to say faithful? That's something we want to do, and that's something that the Lord is looking for. Because on the day that when we stand before the Lord, that's the one quality we hear that he's looking for. It doesn't give a lot. I mean, the test is like one question. Come, good and faithful servant. I'll appoint you over everything. All you had to do was be faithful. Let's make this real simple. Life isn't all that complicated if you look at it this way. You just have to be faithful. It's a one-question test. You got 80 years to get this one question, answer it right, and you can get it wrong 10,000 times, but before the show's over, you got to get this right, okay? It's a blank question here, and the answer is faithful. Faithfulness. That's what we have to be able to get to. Let's look at another example of that. This will be short. We're just going to do these 3 sections. The next one is in Luke. We did Luke 12. Remember this real simple. 12, 16, and 19. Let's look at it now in chapter 16. I'm saying this also as an introduction to the meetings that we're going to have this week, because some people ask me, well, why are you guys together? What are you doing? What are you doing? This is the first thing. We want to be a living example, a living testimony of covenantal relationships. We want to be a living testimony of long-term faithfulness. That's what we want to do. That's the most important thing. People don't tell me, does the world need another ministry? Do they need another project? Come on. Do they need another television show? No, we need an example of relational faithfulness over a long period of time. Let's go on now to chapter 16. And this time he puts it he talks about faithfulness, but he does it in the context of money. Part of it he's talking about money, but part of it he's not talking about money. He's using money as an example to talk about the quality of faithfulness. Now we're in Luke chapter 16, verse 9. V'anochi omer lechem, hasigo lechem yedidim b'mamon hamirma, כדי שכאשר הוא יכלה, הם יקבלו אתכם למשכנות עולם. And I say to you, make for yourselves friends by means of deceitful mammon, in order that when it goes away, when it ends, they will receive you into everlasting dwelling places. Verse 10. מי שנאמן במעט מזער, נאמן גם בהרבה. ומי שאיננו ישר במעט מזער, גם בהרבה איננו ישר. And he says, and he who is faithful in a very little, he is also faithful in much. And he who is not righteous with a little, he also will not be righteous with much. לכן, אם בממון המרמה לא הייתם נאמנים, מי יפקיד בידכם את האמיתי? And therefore, if you were not faithful with unrighteous mammon, who will give into your hands the true worth? Last verse here, verse 12. האם במה ששייך לזולת לא הייתם נאמנים, מי ייתן לכם את אשר שייך לכם? And he says, and if with what belongs to someone else you were not faithful, who will then give you what belongs to you? Notice here that he makes a couple of comparisons. First of all, let's look at size. When you are faithful in a little, and then he gives you a lot. It's the same difference as the time. You're faithful now, he rewards you in the future. But you're faithful with a little, and then he gives you a lot. Now, one of the reasons it has to be a little, because the faithfulness is also a test of humility. So if it was a lot, well, then all of a sudden your pride gets into it. So no, you have to be faithful with a little. That's part of the test of faithfulness. It's got to be something small. Because then he says, and then he will make it big. God says, I've got infinite amount of blessing. And I want to test you with something very small so I can give you something big. It's what I call the Willy Wonka theology. Anyway, do you know what that is? The chocolate factory? All right. He was faithful in a little bit, and then he got the big chocolate factory. Anyway, so he says, you have to be faithful in a little, and then I will give you a lot. And then he also says something that's very interesting. He says, you have to be faithful with something that belongs to someone else, so that I can give you something that belongs to you. Because if you're being faithful what belongs to you, well, so what? What did you prove? Where's the character in that? Where's the faith? What did you? So if it's little instead of big, you got to be faithful. If it belongs to someone else instead of belonging to you, then then that's the test of faithfulness. He says, if you're faithful in a little that belongs to someone else, then I'll bless you with a lot that will belong to you. And then he also says, the things that you're being faithful with are basically false. They're, what do you call false jewels? Not paubles. What do you call that? Baubles. What is the word? No, little false jewels. Anyway, costume jewelry. Like he said, if what you're being faithful with is something that doesn't have a lot of worth, it's a false thing. It may look like it's worth a lot, because I want to give you the real thing. So you got from small to big, you have now to the future, you have someone else's to yours, and you have the false to the true. And that's why he uses money. Now, this is a nice teaching, but one of the things it boils down to is money. Money is easy. When you understand this, you will love to give, because you understand money is a way that you can demonstrate faithfulness to other people, and it looks hard. It looks hard to us because we're so stinking greedy. It's not hard. Giving money away is the easiest thing there is. If it wasn't for your own greed holding on to it, but it's really, as a way to demonstrate faithfulness, it's pretty quick. I love to give. Man, it's easy. I mean, all I got to do is sign the check. That's not that much work. Sometimes the pen seems really heavy, and stuck. Something's not working with this pen. But anyway, it's a really easy way to do it. And I want to bless in terms, I'll take this moment just to, I was thinking about this, and David, I know you don't want us to say this, but it's so obvious to all of us. David Shishkov is a person who is just a living example of faithfulness. And he's 40-something now, 45. And I've watched him since when he was in high school, junior high. We've been together. And I watch him be faithful. And David is faithful in little things. If you think of somebody who's faithful in little things, David is like a living example of this. And even some of us were thinking, come on. I mean, David's been faithful. He's in his mid-40s, like nothing's happening. And then all of a sudden, boom, millions of shekels in one day, boom, just fell upon him. And David's because of you. That's what happened. God saw your faithfulness. And we need to learn that lesson. It's so cool. Now, a little part of the money part of it was neat. When we heard about it, when Eitan told us the story about it, we looked and we said, this is the hand of God. They're trying to get this. We got our staff together real quick. This is before. Well, I guess you saw some of the emails. I said, listen, God's about to bless these guys big. I wrote them. I said, listen, give me 24 hours. I want to be the first donor to this thing. I know it's going to be blessed. I said, give me one. I want the first chicken. We got our staff together. Quick, let's get some money together. We did some quick little fundraising, and we sent them 100,000 shekels. Just to say, because I know God's going to bless this big, but I want to be in on this first, because I don't have a lot of money. But if you're first, if you do it by faith, you can be faithful. And I said, this is an opportunity to be faithful. Now the blessing's coming in. We can sit back and just watch it come in. But money is a way of being faithful to people, because you take something that doesn't necessarily mean that much in itself, but it means something to somebody else when you give it, because it says, hey, your heart's there. Yeshua said, where your treasure is, there your heart is. So when you give, somebody says, that's somebody that loves you, that cares about you. So it's a way of being faithful, as an example. Of course, there's many, many other ways to be faithful. Now, one other point here is, let's look at the cross this way. The cross is Yeshua being faithful to the Father, but it's also him being faithful to us. He's saying to us, you, my dear children, my dear friends, my brothers and sisters, you have sinned. You have betrayed me. You have been so perverted and ugly and nasty, and the Father's about to burn you guys to a crisp, but I want to show myself faithful to you. I'm going to come after you. I want to come and say, I'm going to be faithful to you even if you aren't. And that's what he was being on the cross. I want you to see the cross as the greatest example of any human being ever being faithful to anyone. He's saying, you're not being faithful to me, and I will be faithful to you. Uh-oh. That's another part of the test that we don't want to know. You can't be faithful. Part of the test is you're going to have to be faithful to somebody that you think isn't being faithful to you. Oh, that's hard. Because if you're faithful to somebody that you're already sure is going to be faithful to you, okay. That's like giving money to somebody that's rich. And but God will put you in a situation where it will seem to you like the other people are not being faithful, and you're going to have to be faithful to them, even though they're being unfaithful, on the chance that maybe they'll be faithful in return. And what are the odds that somebody will be faithful in return? 1 out of 10. Remember, Yeshua healed 10 people and one came back. In general, in life, I know that might sound a little pressing, but look at the half cup full. You be faithful, you be faithful, you be faithful, and then people will begin to respond. It may be a minority, but that's part of the test. It's got to look that way. Even when somebody is being, and all of our brothers here, we know that over the years. It feels like the other guy's not being faithful, and I'm going to be faithful to him. All these are not being faithful. He's probably thinking the same thing. That's part of the test, is to be faithful when it seems to you that the other people aren't being faithful. You got what I'm saying there? So Yeshua on the cross was being faithful to us, even when we weren't being faithful to him. Now, here's the amazing thing about faithfulness, what it causes to someone else. If you go to someone else and say, you need to have faith, is that going to increase their faith? No. But if you act faithful to someone, what does it do? It increases their confidence. It makes them feel secure. It builds their faith. So the way you create faith in somebody is by being faithful to them. We have faith because Yeshua was faithful to us first. And so when we are faithful to others, it gives them confidence. They say, well, I may feel like I'm going to fail, but hey, I know my brother, my sister here, he's with me. She's going to be faithful to me all the way. Hey, I can do it. I can make it. When somebody else is faithful to you, it causes you to feel confident and have peace and be secure. And therefore, when we are faithful to others, it makes them relax and be confident and have faith and be able to go forward. So we carry out the faithfulness of Yeshua on the cross. We have faith to him because he was faithful to us. And then because we have faith in him, because of his faithfulness to us, then we can go out and be faithful to others while they're not being faithful to us. And then that can cause them to have faith and be faithful to us. By the way, one of the things that we always teach about Israel, and it's interesting that people don't understand that. The issue about Israel is not Israel. The issue about Israel is not Israel's righteousness or faith or calling or death. The issue about Israel is that God's being faithful. Now, how is God going to show his infinite faithfulness? It's kind of an embarrassing thing. Us Jews, we're so proud of being the chosen people. I mean, what it is, I'm going to choose a people that are unfaithful to demonstrate my faithfulness. That's us. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim. Blessed are you, O Lord, who chose us from all the peoples of the world to demonstrate your infinite faithfulness. Oh, boy. Okay. All right, one last section. Let's look now in chapter 19 and then we'll end. I hope it's going in. The purpose here is that I don't want to teach about it. I want the penny to drop, that from this you'll remember for the rest of your life that we are here to be faithful and live it out. Amen. Chapter 19. Luke chapter 19. Let's look at verse 16. And this is this great story of the 10 talents when Yeshua, when God, the figure in this, gives 5 talents to one and 1 to another, 2 to another and 1. And then he comes back at the end of life. He says, I've given you certain abilities, certain resources in your life, and I want to see what you're going to do with this. I'll give you a long time to do it, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to check you. Whatever you have is an opportunity for you to show yourself faithful. Young ladies, you might be pretty. Okay. Are you going to use that to be faithful or use that to be unfaithful? Somebody might have money. Somebody might have intelligence. Somebody might have whatever qualities, abilities, talents. You can use that same quality to be faithful, or you can use that same quality to be unfaithful. That can be a little scary. Verse 16. ניגש הראשון ואמר, אדוני, המנה שלך הכניס 10 מנים. השיב ואמר לו, יפה עבד טוב, הואיל והיית נאמן במעט מזער, היה שליט על 10 ערים. And so the first came up to him and said, Lord, your talent has brought in 10 more. And then he said, and so he answered him and said, well done, good servant. Because you were faithful in very little, you will be a leader over 10 cities. Of course, the next one he says 5 cities, and the next one he says, take it away from him. He's not going to have anything. Listen, when we teach salvation, whether somebody gets in or out of the kingdom is by one thing. Whether we repent and believe in Yeshua or not, you get in. But that does not determine what position you will have for the rest of eternity. The rest of eternity depends on what you've been faithful with during the time that you're a believer. And it won't be the same thing. That's a lie that a lot of people are hearing. You know, you go to church one day, you're going to say, well, okay, now I received Yeshua, and then I'm just going to live carnally the rest of my life, and I'll get in and expect a big reward from the Lord. No, what you might hear is, you can get in, but take his thing away from him. You can get in, but you're not going to have any position. There will be people in the kingdom of God who will be rulers over 10 cities, rulers over 5 cities, ruler over 1 city, ruler over a house, and there will be people that have nothing, but will be in. So you have salvation, but then you also have your reward. And what he's looking to reward is not how talented and how smart and what you produce. He said, have you been faithful? Again, this is the one thing. Because what we're not used to understanding is that God has infinite resources. So if you have infinite resources, what are you looking for? You're just looking for somebody who will be faithful. You don't need quantity. You just need them to be faithful with something because you can multiply the resources infinitely. So he says, here you've been faithful. He gives you, maybe you're just a single mom taking care of 3 little kids. And God looks at you and says, wow, are you faithful? Here, 3 kids, 3 cities. That's about easy to me. But you don't know. Be faithful. We have to be faithful in living. And the faithfulness in this lifetime translates into government authority in the other lifetime. Is there any other way to interpret that verse? There isn't. Faithfulness in little things in this lifetime translates in the resurrection to government authority for the rest of eternity. Well, just to end here, but we in Israel right now, where we happen to give this, we're right in the middle. We're 1 week away from the elections, and we're right in the middle of the election campaigns, and it has been the dirtiest set of election campaigns. It has been unbelievable. I mean, and here, we have basically every 3 people we have another political party. And so, it's like, and nobody talks about the topics. All they do is stab one another in the back. And we're thinking, guys, don't you realize you're the leader of this society? If you're doing that, what do you think is going to happen with the rest of the people? What do you think is going to happen in the factories and in the schools and in the police department and in the homes and the children in the high schools and in the junior highs? If you're acting like that, what do you think? What do you think is going to happen to our people? It's just a tremendous display of unfaithfulness. And you think God's like, if I could find somebody faithful here, I would put them over 10 cities. And so we want to look to this. Will we be faithful? And that's a quality that God is looking here for us. So all we want to say is that this one quality God is looking for. In the book of Revelation, he says, be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. Life is a test of faithfulness all the way unto the end. And if we have that, then that will result in his blessing and his delegating into our hands. On the basis of small faithfulness now, he delegates large authority for the rest of eternity. And what we need to know is that we're in this lifetime to show ourselves faithful. Now, and I want to just say, that's why we're here. We believe in covenantal relationships. We believe in faithfulness. It's not an issue of projects. It's an issue of who is going to be faithful with one another. And what we want to do is live out a testimony. And as we're going 60 seconds, we're going to break and we're going to go over. And we're about to go in all these board meetings, and people are asking the board, well, what are our projects? What are we doing? What are our budgets? But all that's secondary. Guys, what we're about here is living a testimony of covenantal relationships, living a testimony of faithfulness and loyalty over a long period of time, because this is a scarce commodity. And I believe this is a jewel that the world is looking for. And if we could demonstrate, if we could live it out, not fake it, not advertise it, but live it out, then I believe it could be a real blessing for a lot of people.